Hi, everybody. This is Beatrice Kahn. So pleased to see all of you today. I'm the immediate past president of NCJW and also a past president of New York section. And relevant today, I'm also co-chair of the development committee. So I'm very interested in the program today. We are thrilled to invite you to this NCJW webinar series today. It's a series that's available exclusively to our leadership network, and it's dedicated to creating an online space to connect, learn, be together, and provide leadership skills. So we're very excited to learn today with Ellen Alper and Susan Katzman. In the next 2 hours, we'll discuss how to create a culture of philanthropy and also how to engage more volunteers in section fundraising. Then in the second hour, we'll share concrete techniques volunteers can use immediately to start fundraising. Before we start, a few housekeeping matters. Please, as Samantha said, list your name, section, and pronouns in your Zoom name and introduce yourself on the chat as well. Everybody's mics are muted so we can prevent background noise. And if you would like to engage closed captioning, click on the CC or closed caption button on the bottom of your screen. If you have questions, please ask them as they arise in the chat box. We'll do our best to answer them. You can also write in the chat box if you have technical issues, but note that we have limited capacity to address them while the webinar is running. We're also recording this training and we'll upload it to the website to share with those who could not attend today and for your reference at any time. So before we begin, we'd like to just establish a few community norms that will guide us in our conversation today. They'll be part of our shared practices at the leadership series going forward, and they are: take risks, try out new ideas and practices, be willing to listen as much as you lead, trust each other and check assumptions, and stay on point and be mindful of the time. So with that, it's my pleasure to briefly introduce our speakers, Ellen Alper and Susan Katzman. Ellen Alper is the CEO of NCJW St. Louis section. She works directly with the board and leadership, along with a staff of 20, and has overseen the operations of its resale shop for the past 16 years. She's doubled its net profits during that time. She has more than 35 years of experience in nonprofit management and advocacy work that includes a variety of upper-level organizational positions, beginning as staff assistant in the Carter White House. Susan Katzman is the immediate past president of the St. Louis section of NCJW. And for the section, Susan has served as treasurer, vice president for retail membership and development, and was the first VP for leadership development. It sort of covers it all, right? She started with the St. Louis section, chairing a committee about moving the resale shop from its location or closing it. Thank goodness the decision was to keep it open. She was one of the 10 St. Louis area women recognized in 2020 with the Woman of Achievement Award for her community volunteer work. So please join me in welcoming Ellen and Susan, who will lead us today.
Thank you, Beatrice, very much. And thank you, Samantha, for all your help. I'm Susan, and Ellen and I are delighted to be here today to talk about a subject near and dear to both of our hearts, around fundraising and development. And I think for both Ellen and myself, we both brought to the table our experiences with development in the not-for-profit sector and I was with the school district in St. Louis, so I brought things from there. And we have really moved a lot forward in the St. Louis section, I would say over the past 12, 15 years in the development area. So when we talk today about the culture of philanthropy, let's just talk about that for a second. What does that mean if we define it? I look at the culture of philanthropy with two definitions. One is that in your sections, you are developing a culture of building relationships. It's not just about asking somebody for money and then you don't see them again. It's about building relationships that can be sustained over time around raising money. The other way I also would like to define a culture of philanthropy is that it's okay to go ask for money. One should not be apologetic about doing that. And so when we think about all of that, let me just ask a quick question. When you talk to your boards about raising funds, what kind of response do you get? And you can take yourself off of mute for a minute and just say a quick answer.
Not everybody wants to do that. They feel uncomfortable approaching people and asking for money.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Who else? Elaine?
My board has, I have about 75% that are on board of asking for money and being part of the fundraising events. And the other 25% don't want to do it. And one board member last year was ready to resign when she realized that part of being a board member was to contribute to our financial health.
Okay, thank you, Elaine.
How many of her, you're not a fundraising organization?
Okay, we're not a fundraising organization.
Heard that a lot, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Are you telling me that nobody else has asked their section about fundraising? I can't believe that.
I'm out here in California, and one of the problems that we've had with our section in Sacramento, which is a very small section, I know, compared to most of the rest of you, is there are a lot of opportunities for giving money to other organizations. There's a homeless women's organization that we work with, but there are a lot of rules within NCJW about gifting money to other organizations, and that creates dilemmas with us, especially for newer members and younger members, because they want to give money away.
Okay. Thank you, Laurel.
It's Elaine from Bergen. One of the things that is often raised is how can we fundraise outside of our membership? Because when we're doing our journal, doing our events, and our appeal, it's always, we're expecting the members. And how do we raise money outside the membership?
Thank you, Elaine. Do any of you find that your women tell you, I want to learn how to fundraise? I don't know how to fundraise. Nobody?
This is Linda Finkelstein from Palm Beach. they do not know how to fundraise. When I joined NCJW 6 years ago, there were special events, but they didn't have grant writing. They didn't have sponsorship. And it was really difficult for me to introduce it to them. When we finally did, well, we jumped our community closets from 6 to 17. So they realize that they depend on it now to do the outside sponsorship, but I am still the only one within the section that does it.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
And this,
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna- this is Lori Stockstill, and I'm president of the San Antonio section, and I am probably the most averse to it in our section. So just to add that.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to talk about all of those things today. I think Ellen and I will find ways to address all of that. And you know, if there was a theme for today, I would say there's a video we're going to show, a TED Talk in the second part a little later on. And the ladies whose TED Talk it is, Cara Berlin, says a quote that it really resonates. And the quote is simply, if you want to change the world, you have to know how to pay for it. And I think that really is for all of us. So that leads me into turning things over to Ellen, who's going to talk about why we moved from cultivation to fundraising and what all that has meant. Ellen?
Thanks, Susan. So let me start because I was taking notes on all your comments just to make sure we address them later. So I don't want to forget anything. But let me talk a little bit about why cultivation. Why do we need to create a culture of philanthropy in our sections? I will tell you, when I started at NCJW, I heard the exact same thing. We're not a fundraising organization. We put on programs in the community. We do programs for our membership, but we don't raise money. And then the question becomes, well, if you don't raise money, how do you pay for all of the things that you do? And if you can't pay for them, then you can't do them. Much like the quote that Susan just shared, we want to go out and make a difference in the world and in our local communities. And if we can't afford to do it, then we can't make the difference that we want. So when someone says to you, why do I have to learn how to fundraise? Or why do we have to create a culture of fundraising? Your response to them is very easy. It costs money to do what we want to do in our community, and we have to be able to pay for it. Now, whether we raise it from our membership, whether we raise it from our community, whether we raise it from grants, whether we raise it from family foundations, that's up to each individual section. But by creating the culture of philanthropy, you will be able to identify all those different pieces so that you know where to go to start the process. So in the handouts that you'll get after the session will be a sample development plan that hopefully will spur your brain to fill in some of those blanks of places that you can go in your community. But one of the things you have to start with is just because we are not for profit doesn't mean we can't operate at a profit. It's okay for sections to make money because that's how we have money to spend. We make money, we can invest it, and it earns money for us. We make money, we can develop new programs because we have more than we need, and then we can address new needs in the community. But please don't let anyone ever tell you as a not-for-profit that you shouldn't make money, because that's not the case. We have to run our organizations in a way that allows us to raise the dollars we need to raise to put on the programs we want to put on in our communities. And it is the responsibility of the board. And I heard some of you say I'm averse to fundraising. One of the major responsibilities of a board member is fiduciary. It is the board's role to assure that you have enough money to run the organization the way you want to run it. And so then the question is, how do we get there? How do we create a situation where our board is 100% on board with raising money? Okay. So you go back to your board. And one of the things you need to do is you go back to your board. You may want to start with your executive team if you have an executive team and say, okay, where are we as an executive team about raising money? When we ask someone to come on our board, for example, do we tell them that we expect 100% board participation in our annual campaign? That immediately creates that culture of philanthropy for your board, because they understand that by coming on your board, there is an expectation that they are giving. And what best practices tell us in that regard is that if someone is on your board, their community giving to you should be in the top 3 of what they give in the community. And if they're not, then the question is, why are they on your board? So you need to have individual conversations with every board member. When we started this process, that's what we did. We met with each board member individually to find out where they were, to find out where they were coming from, to find out what brought them to NCJW in the first place. And every single board member at some point got a personal ask to make a donation to support our annual campaign. Because we have to start with our board and we have to model the behavior that we want them to share with our members and members of the public as we expand the opportunities to support our sections. I will remind you, this takes patience and it takes time. You are not going to change the culture of your section overnight, but you will do it gradually as you get more and more people on board. So I'm going to start with presidents. I heard a president say she was averse to raising money. I'm looking for her picture here on the screen. And my response to you is, you know what? We need to work with you first. Because if you can't do it, you can't expect your board to do it. So what do? We learn and we train and we bring in outside people. We look at the experts in our community and say, who can come into a board meeting and teach us how to make that ask? How do we do the research? Your first community, we talk about cultivation and creating the culture. You communicate with your members and the community in many, many ways. And Michelle, I see your hand. If you could put your question in the chat, I would appreciate it. And how do you tell your story? Okay. You have to know how to do that. And so one of the things we're going to talk about as we move into the video, and we're going to move into this in a minute, is we're going to watch a video by Simon Sinek, who is a trendsetter out there. And it's called The Power of Why. So it's not what we do, but it's why we do it. And right now I'm going to turn it over. We're going to start the video. And then if you all could post your questions in the chat while we're going through, that would be great. And we are not going to play the whole video, but we will get you the link so that you can watch the whole thing. It's just a little too long for this session today. So let me turn this over. And when we're through with the video, we are going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to talk about how we can use the information that we heard in our sections, because we really want to drill down to things that you can take home today and do tomorrow or this afternoon or tonight if you happen to have a board meeting tonight. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over. Let Samantha start the video, or Jane, I guess, is starting the video. Okay, so let me do this because we're going to get into breakout rooms in a few minutes. There's a couple things that you did not hear in the video, and I'm just going to share those with you, and I encourage you to please watch it. I hope that what you understood there was we need to change the way we communicate our messaging in order to be successful in our fundraising. Okay. Now, I will tell you, we spent 6 months with our board talking about the power of why. How do we start from the why? How do we tell that story? And how do we make sure every board member can answer that question? And so we did a board retreat that talked about why. We did board meetings where we did small exercises that talked about why are we here? Why do we do what we do? One of the things he emphasized is you want to find people who believe in what you believe because they're going to support it. So, right, your membership is the first place we always go, but there's a lot of people in our community that believe in the work that we do. We just have to connect with them. And we use our board to do that. There are ambassadors in the community. So what I want you to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms of 3 or 4 people each, because we want you all to have an opportunity to talk. And we want you to talk a little bit about the why. Why are people involved with your section? What brought them there in the first place? What makes people write a check? Okay, or run a credit card or do whatever it is they do. But you need to get to the base of why first. And then you talk about what. I can talk about our programs and projects till I'm blue in the face. But if the person on the receiving end is not connecting with me in terms of why we do what we do, I'm not going to have a success with that person. Okay, so we have to reverse our messaging. So Samantha, let's put everybody in the breakouts, and just remember the question is why? Why are we here? Why does NCJW do what it does? And how do we tell that kind of a story? Okay. Back. So what we'd like to do is have some of you start posting in the chat your why. And we want to remind you that to go and watch this entire video when you have a chance. It's only 17 minutes long, I think, because you will learn some other interesting tidbits when you do that. And I do want to share a quick story, and then I'm going to turn it over to Susan, because this gets at the power of why. I know a lot of sections celebrate special anniversaries. So last year was our 125th anniversary. And we brought in an outside marketing consultant who's a member, and we said to her, we're all excited. It's our 125th, and we want to have we want to do all this stuff, and we want to share it with the community. We want to send out press releases and get stories written and put it all over the place. And she turned to us and she said, who cares? Who cares that it's your 125th? And all of us in the room, and it was mostly past presidents and leadership, kind of sat there with our mouth open. And we're like, what do you mean, who cares? She goes, nobody cares that you're celebrating 125th, but you can't just go out there and assume that the rest of the world cares about what you're doing. And she got us thinking in a totally different way in terms of why we do what we do and how do we engage people and how do we move things forward in our community. But I will tell you, it was a culture shock for us when she asked that question. And so it's really important to make sure that everybody gets on the same page in terms of why we're doing what we do. And not that they're telling it the same way, but that everyone has an answer. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Okay, so would you just jot down in the chat, anybody, please, what you talked about in your breakout rooms about the reason why, or what you might have learned from the TED Talk video and how you could use that in your sections?
So I saw Dallas posted that their why is the community service projects. And I'm going to push back on you and tell you that your community service project is your what? It's not your why. Your why is helping people. Your why is making a difference in someone's life. Your why is giving children what they need to go to school every day. Those are whys. Your community service projects are your what. So I want to push all of you to look at how you can change the narrative, because you will find more people that believe in your why than necessarily your what, because they're going to tell you that there's 20 nonprofits in our community that do direct service projects for the poor. So why should I fund yours?
Okay, we advocate for lasting social change. We're a vehicle to be a feminist activist. We help survivors of domestic violence.
Why do you help survivors of domestic violence? Helping them is the what. Why do you help them? Social change. Go back to our mission. We want to improve the lives of women and children and families. Our mission could not be clearer in terms of the why. but that's what we have to talk about. Tikkun olam, that's a why. We want to repair the world. We want to make it a better place.
So in Dallas, we feel unmet needs in the West Dallas community, as well as our other projects. So filling unmet needs, that's a why. Particularly if you can identify what those needs are. So in St. Louis, I want to talk just a little bit more about how we even got to the point we did. You know, certainly there was a time when there weren't staffs for National Council of Jewish Women. There weren't executive directors. There was really a reliance on volunteers to do the bulk of the work. And we all know that the world has changed a lot. A lot of our women are working. And so the need for staff, particularly as sections wanted to expand the services and the advocacy and the work they were doing, the question became, how do we do this if we've got people working, in which case we knew we needed staff. You know, I found even as a president that I had past presidents who believed that the 20-member staff that we now have between the shop and the office, the resale shop and the office, they didn't believe we needed. They still believe that you didn't go out looking for money for staff positions and that type of thing. But the majority of our past presidents recognize that things have changed. And so for us, a dozen years ago, really restarting the conversation, if you will, with our board, there were 2 TED Talks that we showed to really try to shape what that conversation would look like. One TED Talk was the one you just saw by Simon Sinek, and that's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action, getting at the point of understanding the why of what you're doing. And that took us a while to get through. It took discussion groups after we showed this TED Talk to say, okay, what is the message here? And how do we change our message to come from the why? How do our marketing materials change? And the story we're telling, how does that change? The other TED Talk we shared, and we're not sharing it today because we didn't have time, but I want to give you the name of it. It's by Dan Pallotta, Pallotta, and it's called The Way We Think About Charity is Dead Wrong. And the essence of that video is that as not-for-profits, we cannot look at ourselves in that way when it comes to funding what we do and when it comes to how we operate. We have to go into a not-for-profit with a for-profit mindset. Because again, if you go back to the quote from Cara Berlin, if you want to change the world, you have to have a way to pay for it. So you can't apologize wanting to have a balanced budget. You can't apologize for wanting to spend your money wisely and know you're making a difference in the community based on the why of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so after being able to use both of those videos, it really began to generate a lot of conversation about, again, how we develop that culture of philanthropy and what we do when it comes to fundraising. The critical point also came with how we balance out what our volunteers do, our board, and what our staff does when it comes to fundraising. How do we work together? How do we come to common goals and understandings about the work and what we're doing? And so when we did the training, for example, about how we go out and fundraise for our 125th anniversary and for the endowment fund that we set up to go with that, we did not only training for staff, we did training for the volunteers as well. And we as the board work hand in hand with our staff. So it really is very much of a team approach in terms of what we're doing. I want to pay attention to the chat here too for a minute. Okay, good. You've got a lot of whys in there, which is great. Solicitation became very important to what we were doing. And one of the ways we realized that we could expand our reach was to expand our Hannah G. Solomon Society membership. And when we started this, our Hannah G. Solomon Society, the 1,000 or more unrestricted money in a year's time, we were at about $60,000 of money donated for the year in the Hannah G. Solomon Society. The decision at the time was to put together what I called a personal solicitation committee, a committee of about 8 women, several past presidents, the current president, the vice president of development, and a couple of other women who were engaged in philanthropy for the section. And what we did was to take the list of women who were Hannah G. Solomon Society donors, divide them up so that each of us have, if you will, our own portfolio of women in the Hannah G. Solomon Society. And we nurture and steward that group. So when they give their donation for the year, we call and thank them. We give birthday cards out and we make sure they get signed and sent out to people. We talk through how we can expand the number of people involved in Hannah G. Solomon Society giving. Fast forward 4 years, 5 years, and we ended last year at about $172,000 in Hannah G. Solomon. Thank you. And we're proud of, thank you for the claps. And we are proud of that. How do we do that? We printed out a list of the women in the section and others, not just women, people in the section who have donated. And we looked at their donation giving level. And if they were in the $500 to $999 range, we put them on our radar I just spilled my glass of water. Sorry about that. Okay. We put them on our radar to communicate with about Hannah G. Solomon and about the society and so forth. We also added in a component where instead of giving $1,000 lump sum, one could pay monthly or one could pay quarterly. And we added more women that way. The important thing, though, is that we had conversations, confidential conversations, that we needed to have about people's capacity to be able to give. And we do keep notes so that if there are things that we need to remember from year to year, we have that availability to do so. It has been quite successful. We should be on target this year to be pretty close to the 172,000, which we feel very, very good about. Let me open things up for Ellen and for any of you with comments. We are almost at the end of our time, and I want to be sure we can address a question or two that you might have.
So the only thing I would add is that the personal solicitation committee that Susan is talking about is not something we publicize necessarily, but every year we add 2 or 3 new people. We try to find younger people. And I will tell you the ability to give $83 a month to reach your $1,000 was very popular with our younger members. Because then you're not asking them for $1,000 check. You're saying, can you do $83 in a month? And it's a much easier ask for them. And so we had quite a few of our younger board members step up and go to the $1,000 level because we made it easy for them to do so. Okay. But that personal solicitation committee, they love the work that they're doing. They have great success with it. And there's nothing better than calling somebody and saying, thank you. And then the other thing that they do is while they get an official thank you note from the section when someone makes a gift, the members of our personal solicitation committee also write handwritten notes to those folks because that further stewards that personal relationship so that we don't want people to feel that every time they hear from NCJW, we're asking for money. You have to touch someone, according to the experts, 7 times before they take action. 7 times. So your first introduction to a person should never be an ask for money. It should be, here's what we do. Here's why we do it. Here's our bulletin. Here's our newsletter. Here's our email blast. Whatever it is you're sending, you don't always want every communication to be an ask for money. So that when you're ready to ask, you're in the right place and they're in the right place to receive it, and you will have much stronger success. There's a question in the chat about keeping track of data. So we use a software called Donor Perfect in St. Louis. Some folks just use an Excel file where they put a name in there, and every time someone makes a donation, they keep it in Excel and they might put a note in there. You know, I might be talking to someone about their Hannah G. Solomon gift and they may casually say, oh, by the way, I put NCJW in my will. Well, that's an important piece of information for us to have. So we write it down and we enter it into the database. So it's really important to keep records and to keep track of, well, I called them on this day and I left a message and they weren't around. So I called them a week later. When our personal solicitation committee meets, they report out on those phone calls, or when we could do it, meetings in person. We did a lot of coffees, a lot of breakfast meetings, a lot of, you know, that one-on-one that is very hard to do now because of the pandemic. But don't get me wrong, you can still do it.
Okay, we need to stop for part 1.
So this is your opportunity to grab a snack, get a drink, use the facilities, whatever it is you got to do before we start again at 2 o'clock. With the second half, which will be the tips and tricks that you can take home today and do tonight or tomorrow to help you in this process of raising money and to help your section.
Samantha, we turn things back over to you. Just about everybody's back. And if it's okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. As Ellen said, what we want to do now is to put a little more meat on the bone, if you will, and talk more about some of the strategies we used, some of the items we used, and we do want to share part of another TED Talk with you, which we think can be really beneficial and helpful. I want to say to you from a personal point of view, the staff is very important, without question. We also recognize that some of you on this call don't have a lot of staff. And so the question becomes how you handle a lot of this through your board and with your board leadership being obviously very, very, very strong, extremely strong. I found as a president that it really has to start with me. I know I heard somebody earlier, I don't remember if it was Elaine or just who it was, comment that she wasn't comfortable with doing this kind of work. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that the only people who can be presidents of sections are those that are comfortable going out asking for money. I'm only suggesting that the president has to lead, and you can't sit back and ask the rest of your board to be engaged in this kind of work without leading the pack, if you will, and leading the conversation and leading by example. And it may be as simple as going with the CEO to ask for money, or going in groups of 2s and 3s to meet with somebody over coffee or over lunch. Maybe you don't do it just you alone with that person, but you do it with others. But I think it's first about the president really getting comfortable and then making sure that it moves and spreads to the rest of the board. So we're going to talk a little more about some strategies with that, but to really introduce more of the conversation, we want to share a video with you. It's a TED Talk by Cara Berlin. And let me just tell you who Cara Berlin is. She is the owner of Harvest, which is a New York-based not-for-profit development, fundraising, and communications company, female-owned. She used to be with the Robin Hood Foundation. If you've heard of the Robin Hood Foundation, she was their major gift officer. And she was director of development for the Harlem RBI project, which is a youth center project in Harlem. And she's the one I mentioned to you who said, again, if you want to change the world, you have to know how to pay for it. So this is a longer video, and we are starting it kind of in the middle. And we urge you to watch the whole thing on your own if you want to see the whole thing. I will tell you that she has a lot of clients. Some of her current clients are the Obama Foundation, the Dance Theater of Harlem, and the Walton Family Foundation. So she does have some great clients under her belt. After the video, what Ellen and I want to do, we're going to move you again into breakout rooms. And here's your topic for the breakout rooms. Based on the information you hear Kara Berlin give you, how can you use that in your sections? And then please identify one person who will report back out in the chat so we can know what you talked about. Okay, so that's Kara Berlin. So let's go into our breakout rooms for about 7 minutes. And please, would you talk about how you can take the information you just received in the past 10 minutes and use it in your sections around philanthropy and around fundraising. Samantha? Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. So, can we hear a couple of comments in response to the question? What did you learn from Kara Berlin that you could take to your sections? And I would love it if you would take yourself off of mute and speak.
I can say a few things.
Okay, Laurel.
I was in a group with women from Chicago and Long Island, and one of the things that we talked about was how we need to use, especially in larger sections, you need to use digital tools to help get to that personal relationship that Kara was talking about, because it's so hard to track everything. And I forget the woman's name, but she's an administrator of a section or an executive director. And she uses this software called Little Green Light. And it makes it possible for them to keep track of who donated what and why. And it even has personal notes like, do not call this woman more than once a year. And I think that's important. I mean, I don't think it's good to just send out emails to people. We have to call people. We have to meet with them in person, but we need to use digital tools to make us better at that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think we use Donor Perfect, and it's critical that you put notes in there.
We also use Google Docs that any of you could use at no cost. We have our 125th development list on a Google Doc for the whole committee to look at, and there's notes in there and amounts and comments, and any one of you can do that at no cost.
Yeah, I'm cautioning you that this is a time of escalated hacking, and I'm urging you to make sure that these donor databases with financial information in them are secure. So
thank you for that reminder.
Thank you,
I do
Judy.
want to address a question in the chat. It says, how do we compete with Federation or synagogues and other local organizations? Here's what I'm going to tell you. There is plenty of money in your community.
there isn't.
No, there is. I'm going to tell you that there is. And I'm going to tell you that you need to identify the folks that believe in what you believe. Okay? And once you do that, you will find that sitting down to talk to them is a very easy proposition.
You know, Ellen, I just want to go back to something. I'm proud that this is an organization with a long, successful history. My grandmother was a member. So I think we need to be mindful of family philanthropy and how important that is as well. So, donating to NCJW connects me with my grandmother. So there's lots of ways to look at things and lots of reasons why people give.
Very good point. Very good point. Thank you. Let's go one more group to
Debbie had her hand
Yeah.
up, I think.
I was in a group with Bonnie and Shannon, Dallas and Peninsula. And what you just said, Ellen, was that we actually talked about that that we know that there are members that give to other organizations in our area in greater amounts than they give to us. And I believe it was Bonnie that suggested that we have to make it clearer of how what we're doing is, better, how we do it. I'm not quite sure how you said that, Bonnie, but we have to get that across to these people, because there is money there. Even we're in Chicago, and so we have lots of competition. The other thing that we talked about really quickly was that reaching out to members beyond our membership, to people, and how important getting that background information is. And that should be a priority before we do the ask.
And the one thing I would add as part of your research, and it doesn't take any money or any staff to do this, every single annual report you can get your hands on, keep it and look at it and see where people are giving and at what levels, because that's going to tell you what people believe in. We scour our federation's annual report, the synagogue's annual report, because they list all their donors and they list them by giving level. Well, there's no reason why you shouldn't use that information as you put your list together to start targeting potential donors for your section.
Good
Ellen?
idea.
Elaine?
Yeah, Dallas relies heavily on non-Jewish donors to support our projects. We go to the banks we deal with, we go to brokerage houses, we go to family foundations, we go to individual philanthropers in the community. And we do it the same way she talked about, you invite them for coffee, you talk about their kids, and then call them again. And so we have a group of members that are very generous. And then we have our outside donors and our grants.
And thank you for that. It's so important to do, you can easily research or have somebody, maybe an intern in the summertime, a member who might be home convalescing, who wants something to do, and you put them to work doing some research on various companies and organizations within your communities and what their missions are. And what their goals are in terms of their philanthropic giving. So another good way to kind of find out where you can head in your community. Is there one other group that would like to report out on what they discussed? Barry Lynn?
I just want to really stress what Dallas has been able to do. I was really blown away by it. They're raising, I think, between 400 and 500, maybe a little bit more some years, purely, as I understand it, through community people, banks, foundations, corporations. They've done this over time. And I think they said that that these donors love what NCJW is doing in the community. And I think they sell themselves as fixers. And I was really impressed with that number, particularly to know that it's coming from outside membership.
Thank you. Thank you. In listening again to what Kara Berlin had to say, the point she makes about people give to people. And again, she talked about relationships, as we did earlier, that it's about developing a culture of philanthropy is about developing a culture of building relationships with people that are long-term, that can be nurtured, that are nurtured. And, it can even be at a meeting practicing doing some role playing about how you get at people giving to people and how you establish those relationships in terms of discussion. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, well, I would have donated, but I was never asked. And then there are different ways that people respond. I know Ellen had talked about our 125th development that we did. You know, when we were approaching some former presidents, board presidents, one of them we sat with, three of us sat with her for a good hour. When we left there, she said, I'll give something, it won't be 125,000. We got to the 125,000 because we had a Hannah G. Solomon donor who said to us, you've got 125th anniversary coming up. I think you need to set up an endowment fund. And I think the endowment should be 1.25 million. And I think you need 10 people who will give you $125,000. And I'll give you the first $125,000, but I suggest you go find 9 more. At that point, we had not been, we had thought about fundraising for the 125th, but we had not thought about starting an endowment or raising 1.25 million. So Ellen has told you, we ended up raising 1.6 million and we're not quite finished. We still have one more big luncheon to do. But so the one lady said to us, I won't give you 125,000, but I'll give you something. And you'll hear from me in the next few weeks. And a few weeks later, Ellen gets a handwritten note from the lady giving us 140,000, which obviously we were expecting less than 125,000. On the other hand, another past president and I took a past president for coffee. We sat down at the table in the middle of Barnes and Noble, and she said, you don't have to say anything. I'm in for 125,000. Now, what do you think about the political campaign? So it's like you get everybody coming from all different angles. I want to talk for just a minute as Ellen and I get into our trips and tricks of the trade. I want to talk about circle of influence. Samantha, will you put that up, please? Thank you. We were concerned with the board that we really had talked about the why. We'd had a lot of that discussion. And now we really needed to find some additional ways to really get our board members out to get not only funds, but to get other donated items that we needed that we could use that had a monetary value that we could use for some of our events. And so what we did was to take the November board meeting, which we pretty much continue to do, and devote it to fundraising. And we started out saying, first of all, that every board member needed to be on a development committee. Now, what did that mean? We do a trivia night, so that's got a committee. We do a luncheon, that has a committee. We have the annual campaign, that has a committee. We also put together a thank you committee so that when people made their annual campaign donations, any other donations, they would get a personal phone call. They might also get it from the president, but they would get a personal phone call from someone else. So everybody had to sign up, and we sent the sign up list around the room for one development committee. The second thing we did was to introduce the circle of influence. It's really very simple. But the you was the person in the middle. You put your name there. And in the first circle, you would list any people or companies that you know of that could be approached to contribute a service or a gift item. So for example, for our trivia night, we have a lot of use for restaurant gift certificates, $25 and $50 restaurant gift certificates. And we need them for other events, ways to say thank you to people. So where could you go to get, what restaurants could you go to? What hairstylist or shoe repair or pet service or tutoring service, dry cleaners, car wash, could you go to get a gift card for a gift service? Then, and as you can imagine, that circle would be heavily populated. Then the second circle out gets a little deeper. What are some organizations or companies or people that you're connected to that could be approached by NCJW for a major gift? We called it 1,000 or more, or for technical resources. And what we said was, you don't have to go, we'll go. But we'd like to use your name. We'd like to have a name and a phone number that we could connect to somebody. So we're not just making a cold call. And people gave us names. They were relieved to know they didn't have to go, that we would go. And, or our vice president of development would go. And they would solicit. So this is a vehicle. Thanks, Samantha, you can take that away. This is a vehicle we continue to use all the time as a way to engage our board in doing this work. So we've got more things to share with you, and Ellen's going to do that.
Sorry, I forgot about mute. All of the resources that we put up on the screen or that we talk about are going to be sent to you after this call is over. So this is the tips and tricks where you're going to want to write it down or come back and watch the recording later about things that you can do to make this easy for your board. So you need stuff. You need restaurant gift cards. You need manicures and pedicures and all those kinds of things because you're doing a raffle or you're doing an auction or you're doing whatever. So I'm going to tell you 2 things you need to do for your board in order to make that happen. 1, every one of your board members should get a business card. You can buy the templates at any office supply store. You create them like your business cards, and it says Ellen Alper, board member, National Council of Jewish Women, and ours say creating change and impacting lives since 1895. The second thing you put in their hands is a copy of your tax exempt letter. You give it to every board member and you say, look, carry it around in your purse. You go out to dinner somewhere with your family. Now, this was much easier pre-COVID, I will admit. And you're taking 10 or 15 people out to dinner. Ask for the manager to come over to your table and say, hey, we just had a great meal. And by the way, I volunteer for this great non-for-profit. Could your restaurant donate a $25 or $50 gift certificate? And you make that ask in front of all 15 people that are at your table at the restaurant. It is really hard for that manager to say no, because you've just spent several $100s for dinner. I mean, we encourage our board members to carry their business card and the tax letter with them everywhere they go, because you never know who you're going to meet and when you're going to meet them. And I mean, how many of you have distributed your tax letter to your board so that they have it? Chances are not too many. Bonnie has, Gloria said they've done it at her section, but it's an easy, simple way to do something when you're already out and about, so you're not making an extra trip, okay? And you're asking for stuff. Stuff is really easy to ask for from organizations and businesses. Now, be cognizant of who you're asking. If you're talking to a business that's had a terrible time during the pandemic, the last thing you want to do is start asking for this kind of stuff, okay? Your tax letter, I see it in the post. Your tax letter is the letter that's given to you by your state that says you are tax exempt, okay? That's what the business wants so that they know they are making a tax exempt donation to NCJW. And you should be able to get that from your Secretary of State. Somebody has to have it on file. It's the same letter that says you don't pay sales tax when you go in to buy stuff for a program or an event. Okay, that's your tax exempt letter. So Bonnie says they put it in the board kit we give every year to our board members. It's a great way to do it. When you do your board orientation, put all this stuff in there. Okay, Circle of Influence is a great document to do at a board meeting. I'll give you another one that's going to be in the resources. We call it Going for Gold. And we did it at a board retreat during the Olympics. That's why we called it that. But we said, give us 10 people you can approach for $100. Give us 5 people you can approach for $500. Give us 3 people you can approach for $1,000. And again, you don't necessarily have to make the ask, but we will partner with you to make that ask. They just have to identify the prospects. And that's how you start doing it. And that's how you engage your board in that process, because you hand that out, they fill it out at a board meeting, or you email it to them and they all send it back. You do it as a Google Doc. However your board communicates, that's how you do it. You want to make sure you develop a fund development plan for your section so that you have a path to follow. Just like every section should have a strategic plan that guides their work, you should have a fund development plan that outlines how much money you want to raise and how you want to raise it. And there will be a sample plan in the documents that are sent to you. Don't dismiss what I've heard several of you say and put in the chat: personal thank you calls and personal notes. When was the last time you got a personal thank you note at your house? Think about that, okay? And how much it meant to see a personal handwritten note for something that you did. Trust me, it makes a difference. And you want to keep a record of all of those things that you're doing so that you can pass it on to the next person. It doesn't do us any good if we start it this year and then next year we get a new VP of development and we start all over. The last thing we want to do is reinvent the wheel every single year. We want to find those things that work for us, make sure we codify it in our operations, make sure that we document it, and make sure that we share it with the person that comes behind us. So what I want to do now, and those are some little things that you can do right now: business cards, tax letters. If you're having a special event, give every one of your board members a form that you can take in somewhere to solicit for an item. They're easy to create, and we are certainly happy to share samples of those kinds of things as well. But don't forget to ask your board who they know and who they can connect you to. Ask them, who do you know that's on the board of a private family foundation? Or who do you know that has their own family foundation that we could potentially talk to? But if you never ask the question, you never get the answers. And there's a whole lot of missed opportunities out there for all of us that we can use to broaden that scope beyond just our members to support our work. I mean, I will tell you that there are several of our $125,000 gifts that we secured, and understand we secured them as cash gifts. We secured them as legacy gifts, so people put them in their wills. Or we secured them as plan gifts where they said, I'll give you $25,000 for 5 years. A good number of them are not members of our section, but someone was able to open the door for us to allow us to get in. I will tell you this novel idea, but we have men on our personal solicitation committees because they have connections sometimes that the women don't, and they're willing to open doors for us. Our board president is on the call. I don't know if she's still on. Yeah, she's still on here. Her husband knows everyone in the community, so we put him on our committee for our 125th development. And you know what? He has opened doors for us, and it has been extremely successful. So it doesn't always have to be the warm bodies that are sitting in the room every single day. Think outside of the box when you do that. And with that said, we want to open it up to Q&A for the last few minutes that we have. Feel free to take yourself off of mute and raise your hand, and we will recognize you that way so you can ask your questions. I see Gail Eisenkramer has a hand up.
Yeah, and don't discount if you're big enough to have an advisory council of people in the community that believe
very much on the work that you do. Go to them for their contacts also. It's a great way to raise money.
And I will just share that our advisory council is a group of people in the community. They are not members of NCJW. They are involved in corporations, in businesses, in other nonprofits. We bring them together 3 times a year, usually at breakfast time. We used to feed them, but during the pandemic, we Zoom them. And we bring our ideas and our challenges to them, and they help open doors for us. And they support our work in a very different way. And so that's really cool. Other questions?
Bonnie, did I see your hand up?
I had my hand up. I just mentioned the importance of our male allies. And I know sometimes that's hard to wrap our arms around that. But I don't think we can get too far without our male allies. So I think we need to treasure them more and honor them more, actually.
And the other thing I will add too is sometimes when you're out there making the ask, it's couples. It's not just an individual. Sometimes you need to meet with partners, and just recognize that when you do your homework as you go out to talk to people. Okay. I will tell you that if you, in just little bitty ways, start implementing some of these things in your section, you will very slowly change the culture to one of philanthropy. Lori, you've got your hand up. Oh, you're muted. There you
All
go.
right. Oh, I also put in the notes, you might wait until later to answer, Ellen, what is your why? But before you go there, is it wise to solicit somebody who's a good friend, or should you have somebody else solicit them?
You know, that depends on your comfort level with that person. Sometimes when you solicit a good friend, it's way too easy for them to say no to you because you are a good friend. So sometimes it makes sense to take somebody else with you. And I will tell you, one of the things that we've learned is that peer-to-peer solicitation works best. Okay. So for me, I always go with a volunteer. I never go by myself, very, very rarely. And solicitation can take place in many different forms. I have a volunteer partner, and we used to, the woman that suggested we start our 125th campaign, she never wanted to meet with us. She didn't want to talk to us on the phone. She would only text with us. Okay. So I'm going to tell you that we got her to make an $18,000 gift via an ask in a text message. So don't discount the technology. You have to communicate with those people the way they want to be communicated with. Not the way you're comfortable with necessarily, but the way they're comfortable. And it does work. And other questions? And I will share too that Susan and I are both available offline. I know Samantha's going to put our emails and phone our emails in the materials. We are happy to talk to anybody individually. If you want more details about how we did this with our boards and how we shared the information with our boards. And my why is changing the lives of women, children, and families in our community. Everything we do, from advocacy to community service to membership to education to philanthropy, is all about changing and improving lives. And that's my why. And it's hard to argue with that one.
And you didn't ask me, but mine is equity.
You know, everybody comes to NCJW with a different why. And we just need to understand what it is so that we can take advantage of it. The other thing you don't want to hesitate to do is, if someone is afraid to make an ask, bring in somebody to do board training at your board meeting. Do some role playing. Talk about the things that Cara Berlin talks about. I mean, she opens the session, which you didn't see, with fundraising is the other 4-letter word. Okay. And she talks about baggage and getting through your own fears about money and your own concerns about money before you can ask somebody else for money. And it is something you have to think about. You know, oh, I only give $1,000. So how am I going to ask somebody for 10,000? Well, you know what? Let me go find somebody else that gives at the 10,000 level and bring them with me, or whatever the case may be. But that peer-to-peer piece really does work. Other questions, comments? thoughts that we missed, things we didn't answer. I know there was a question about bequests. We did not touch on that a lot today, but I will tell you, asking for a bequest is no different than asking for a cash gift. It's asking someone to support the work that they are already supporting in perpetuity after they're gone. And it's how you frame it and how you phrase it. That you've been a Hannah G. Solomon donor for 10 years. Don't you want that work to continue? Elaine, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I think for some of us, I don't think we're ready for the big asks, but it's also, I guess, about infusing fundraising in the board and into the membership and helping people raise their $50 gift to 100. So, you guys are talking about bigger dollars, but I think you bring that whole process down to all levels.
100% correct. And Bill?
Absolutely. And Elaine, that 1.6 million we raised for the endowment, yes, we had some $125,000 and $140,000 gifts, but we had a lot of people at 50 and 100. Absolutely. And at 125.
125 was kind of the ask that we made in honor of the 125th.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the other thing we did is we went to go get 100% board support for that endowment campaign as well. So every board member was personally asked to give to the endowment campaign in some way, shape, or form. Now, most of them gave at the $125 level because they were also giving to our annual campaign.
Right.
And they bought tickets to our fundraiser and all of those kinds of things. And you know what? Every gift is important no matter the size. And we need to make people feel valued for whatever size gift they make. That $10 or $25 gift is just as important as that $125,000 gift. And that's what you want
Absolutely.
people to know.
And on that note, we thank you so much for
you.
being with us. I reiterate what Ellen said. We're available if you need to talk to us or email or reach out. Thank you. Stay well and have a great rest of the day.
And we're happy to stay on if anyone has specific questions.
Yeah, I want to
you
take
have.
this moment to thank Susan and Ellen for what really was a incredible presentation, chock full of information. There's so much that struck me, but I think it's really important for us to understand that we can and we must make money. Otherwise, we can't do our work. It's something that we're entitled to take our rightful position among all the organizations in our community who are asking us for money. And that if we share our passion and that we will make that happen, and there we can learn, we can train our boards, we can each take some small way that's comfortable to get this money and get this process going. So thank you, that was so illuminating. I hope that everyone will share something that they took away from the event and from this session in the chat, and also to take a moment to complete the survey that's going to pop up on your screen. Your feedback is really important as we plan future sessions. And again, if you have any constructive feedback, you can also reach out to Samantha Weil at swile@ncjw.org. And as was said at the beginning, the recording is going to be available soon in the next few days for anybody who registered. And also, I hope that you'll join us for upcoming leadership series webinars. First, next Monday, May 3rd at 1:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 to 12 Pacific time on navigating board expectations, conflict, and succession with our partners at Leadership Montgomery. We'll learn how to foster a shared understanding of the role of board members, resolve organizational and interpersonal conflict, and plan for a long-term leadership succession. That's often a sticky issue for most leaders. So again, thank you for spending this time with us today. Again, thank you to Ellen and Susan for sharing your expertise. And to one of the points that was raised, I hope we'll all go out and talk up how great this was among our colleagues, and future webinars, they'll want to participate as well. We can be practicing our solicitation skills right now just to get people engaged that way. So stay safe, healthy, and look forward to seeing you again soon.